So today we are talking to Andy Price, Customer Insight Manager at Halfords. As part of the customer experience team, he's responsible for representing customer insight at all levels. Andy is proof that great insights don't always come from big departments. He's navigating the world of customer experience with autonomy, agility, and sharp strategic lens. Andy is a joy to talk to. I think you're in for a real treat today. He's welcoming and generous, but never afraid to challenge. We'll be digging into where he finds inspiration and how he ensures customer insight always has a seat at the table. Andy, welcome to Winning Minds.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you, Andy. I am really excited for our discussion today. And when we first sat down together, I shared with you sort of 5 big questions that I'm keen to uncover your perspective on. I guess the first one is an interesting question, sort of recognition that customer insight, holding a mirror up to businesses, getting people to really listen, to really kind of empathize is it's a tough job. There are lots of rewards, but it is a tough job. You could do anything. Why do you bother doing this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I certainly, from all the conversations I've had with other customer insight specialists, it can be a bit of an uphill battle to kind of really get the customer at the forefront within organizations. But I think me personally, my background is very much research side. Prior to joining Halfords, I worked at a research agency, mainly doing social research. I think from there, I really always enjoyed that research side of things. So, I've always loved getting sort of a fresh set of data tables for whatever it might be that we've researched, and really having a look through and understanding what the data's telling me and what the story is. I think the really great thing with working in sort of a customer centric function, and kind of the reason why, despite it maybe being a bit of an uphill battle at times, why it's really worthwhile is that you can take the research element, which I really enjoy, and actually apply it to improving customers' experiences. And, to some degree, it's essentially, improving their lives, whether it's helping them with day-to-day aspects. At Halfords, big part of our business is motoring. And, it's just crucial for so many people's day-to-day lives. Helping them there is really fulfilling. And then equally, when it comes to the cycling side of the business, I think for many of our customers, the cycling side is more of a passion and something that they really enjoy. Being able to take their thoughts and their feelings and their perceptions and essentially take that to the center of a business, I find really satisfying, really gratifying.
I was really taken when you said, it can be a bit of an uphill battle. Can you give me a little insight into the battle? What are some of the walls you hit?
I think probably the biggest factor is marrying up the importance of putting the customer first, as well as the commercial side of the business. I mean, we're a publicly listed company, as all retailers are essentially. And, for the business and for most of our stakeholders, the key thing is going to be thinking about revenue, thinking about profitability, thinking about the commercial side. And whilst I don't think that there's any disagreement that being a customer-centric business leads to commercial success, and there's hundreds of examples of that in recent years. Sometimes being able to say, okay, this decision that we think should be made in the interest of customers, being able to say, it will have a commercial impact, and if anything, trying to present the actual commercial impact to a decision that's being made. I certainly think that's probably the hardest thing, and probably where you get the most pushback and the sort of the uphill struggle there.
It's so interesting with things like that, isn't it? Because whenever you read any literature on it, I mean, the commercial upsides of customer centricity are enormous. I mean, the customer really is the oxygen of a business. It's interesting, that disconnect, isn't it? We know that, we feel it. It makes kind of so much sense, and yet in the moment, businesses can be drawn to kind of make a different move.
Yeah, definitely. I think you come to a meeting and people might be talking about things like changing the price, whether that's increasing the price or decreasing it. that all can kind of become quite, I suppose, sort of mathematical, scientific. You can model that and go, okay, we think if we make this decision, it will lead to, this increase or this change in revenue and profitability. Whereas I think with customer insight, I think so often it's kind of saying, we've gone out to customers, we've asked them about this new proposition, or we've tested some messaging. And this is the feedback we get, but it's maybe hard to quantify that in the sense that, okay, well, if we do this, it will lead to X increase in revenue for the business. And I think, fundamentally, it's a commercial business. So it's kind of in the business to, yes, look out for customers and providing them the best possible experience, but at the same time, shareholders are going to be looking for return on their investment, and trying to make that case is certainly probably the biggest struggle that we get within customer.
Yeah, yeah. We often talk a lot about sort of customer, exercising your customer instinct. Sometimes kind of customer understanding, customer insight. It's not necessarily to draw a perfect line between, okay, this and this. It's to really empathize with the sorts of challenges your customers might be up against, the kind of missions they might be pursuing, the impact this is really going to kind of have in their world. So our next question, Andy, I'm really interested in your answer to this. I love this question. And we first sort of talked around it when we first kind of sat down. So I'm interested to know who you are going to kind of reflect on. But the next question is, who do you owe? We're all standing on the shoulders of lots of different people. People influence us, help us see the world slightly differently, set us on a different trajectory. I am interested to know who came to the fore in your mind when I posed that question to you.
I think there's probably a couple of different elements there. I think one is a specific person, and the other is, I suppose, almost like a selection of people and organizations. Probably the biggest person I owe is someone called Deborah Walmsley. She used to be the head of customer strategy and insight at Halfords. She went to Virgin Atlantic after that, and currently she works for the IMA. But she was a massively experienced insight specialist. She had decades in the industry, and she knew a huge amount, certainly in understanding how to map out stakeholders, and then kind of the best approaches to influence them, kind of understanding how does the business operate in terms of, one of her key things is when you come into any organization and you have to understand, well, how does it make money? What are the key areas, and how can we feed into that to kind of get the customer into that process? And then just sort of kind of general personal skills in terms of things like confidence, understanding. I don't manage anyone at the moment, but how I'd like to manage people going forward. I think Deborah is massively influential to me there. I still keep in touch with her and talk to her on things like the IMA. So she's still a big influence now.
Yeah, amazing. Interesting now, because we're going to flip in and I'm going to ask you what your big secrets are. I am very keen to hear what you've got to say. I think, winning consumers' hearts and minds, that's kind of the game of the business. Obviously, you're attempting to kind of really influence that from the kind of, I guess, best, most empathetic kind of customer view. So yeah, I'm really interested to know what your sort of thoughts are on the kind of smartest moves to be making right now. What the kind of big secrets are.
Yeah, so I had to think about this before, and I kind of came up with three key areas, I think. And I think the first thing is within your team, understanding what it is that makes you good as a customer insight specialist. Kind of what are your personal skills? And I suppose if you've got a broader team, understanding the skills of the individuals within your team. So for me, with my agency background, it's things like data analysis, it's storytelling, it's kind of stuff that I was really brought up with when I joined the industry. And it's really continuing to lean on that and to let it speak for itself. So, once we're able to kind of get a piece of work commissioned, get a project off, doing the field work and getting results, it's about going, okay, how can I wow stakeholders with the data? they always go in quite excited because they want to know the answers themselves. But if you're able to really kind of blow them away and show like, look, this is all, really interesting and really easy to understand, key findings from an insight piece, and they think, wow, this was brilliant. This is going to really help me in whatever it is I have to do. In itself, that gets the voice of the customer in stakeholders' decision making. But it also means that they will come back to you time and time again because they want more of the really great work. I think there's a huge amount of skill, and it's an industry that requires people to be really quite multi-talented. You have to be great at things like data analysis and the numbers side, but you have to be great at communicating, good at things like graphic design, to be influential, but you also have to be able to design a questionnaire. That there's so many skills that go into the customer insight industry. I think really understanding what it is that you're particularly great at, how can you use that to your best advantage to influence others and influence people within your business. I think that's probably certainly one of the main secrets. I think doesn't really feel like it should be a secret, but I think maybe it's sometimes a bit taken for granted.
I think it's so true. I think that idea that we sort of have kind of so many different roles, and I think if you can just layer two of those things together, you get to a very magic place very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the other secrets is it's really understanding your audience, trying to get to the bottom of what stakeholders want. So I think if someone comes in with a request, don't take it at face value. Ask for a brief. Ask to have a conversation. And I have things like a template which I go through, which has like a series of questions to really understand, for one, how important is this request? Is it kind of worth the limited capacity I have? Will it help the business more broadly? But then if I'm happy with that, it's then going, okay, well, let's understand the purpose of this request. What is it that they're working on that they want support with? People aren't always best at judging exactly what question they need to ask. Sometimes it's about kind of really getting to nitty gritty. I think it's almost a bit like doing something like a stakeholder interview, which you may well have done when you have a big research project, you've been commissioned by a client, and they go, okay, to start with, and do a series of stakeholder interviews to really understand what it is that you want, so we can do our best. And taking that approach to stakeholders within a client-side business, I think that's another really great way to do it, and you can use that to really shape the final outputs. Sometimes it needs to be quick, and they're not looking for a thorough debrief. It's more like, give me the key findings as soon as they're ready, and that's fine. Sometimes you're doing a bigger piece that's maybe less urgent but really critically important. You go, okay, we need to do a really thorough debrief where we really deep dive into the data, but then try and create these quite simple to understand stories. So I think, as well as understanding your skill set, understanding who it is that you're trying to influence and how best to influence them, I think is massive too.
I think it's really interesting that, so much of that, if you really bubble it down, comes into empathy, which is something we talk about kind of all the time. I think our views on it and maybe how we're exercising it is quite different, but really, like, that's the that feels like sort of a heart of the muscle. My next question for you, Andy, I have deliberately framed in the present tense. Very interested to know what hurts. I think too often when we talk about things that are sort of challenging, or maybe even are a bit of that kind of fail fast thing, which everyone talks about and it gets a lot of likes and a lot of kind of airtime. But I think in reality, we never talk about when we're failing. We talk about it, 6 months after, 12 months after, when actually it all worked okay, fine, and everyone's all right. I'm interested to know what you're sort of like grappling with. What's something that's, I don't know, either in your mind that feels like a bit of a kind of wild challenge you're trying to get your arms around at the moment, something you're pivoting, it's something that's sort of niggling.
Yeah, I think over the last few years, probably the thing that's hurt the most has been kind of the impact that the cost of living crisis has. I think it's probably certainly a massive thing amongst retailers, who really feel like they're probably some of the hardest hit retailers, and then working in hospitality businesses as well. Um, I think the impact from the cost of living crisis is massive, and it does lead to businesses kind of really having to reevaluate everything that they do, where there is kind of excess and things where there's maybe more investment in certain areas than they think there should be, and so then I suppose the thing that hurts is that it really becomes about putting forward a strong case for your area, and I think it's the same for all departments. It'll be the same for marketing. It'll be the commercial teams, the operational teams. Everyone has the same impact, because as a business you need to kind of weather this storm. You're going to have a decline in demand from consumers as they're kind of looking to tighten their belt. Thankfully it feels like we're coming out of that phase, but kind of, as I've often discussed with colleagues, it's not like you flip a switch and all of a sudden consumers are spending again, and it's all great. I think it takes a while for the consumer mindset to change from one of kind of saving and almost like survival in a way, to one where actually there is more affluence and they can spend more freely. It's a very gradual case, and it is positive that it feels like the economy is moving in that direction. But certainly you still have to really justify kind of every pound spent on things like the inside budget, and really making sure that the money you do spend is really impactful, and that you really squeeze the most you can out of any kind of insight project that you do, because I think it does become a case where you really have to validate the work that you do. And I suppose from a kind of broader customer view is that, because everyone is kind of trying to fight for that budget, fight to maintain the spend, because everyone feels like their area is most important. That sometimes customer does feel a bit fluffier than kind of commercial. It's a bit, it's harder to assign certain values on decisions that are made. Certainly, as often it's more of a supportive function within a business, right? I think often the kind of advice that we're providing is kind of to help the proposition team develop a new proposition. You say, okay, well, our advice is certainly has an impact on that proposition and its success, but how much do we say was due to customer insight, and how much would you say that was actually just due to the proposition team designing it and working with the commercial teams, working with the operation teams? I think that is probably the thing that hurts the most, because you do end up in situations occasionally where like a decision is made and you've put the customer forward, but sort of the commercial side might outweigh the customer input, and so maybe a decision that you don't agree with and can't really stand by is made. But I think the reality is you just kind of have to keep going. You can't let it get to you. You have to maintain a level of resilience and persistence. Things will always change. You may be able to win over that argument at a later date, but I think you just have to go with the view that, well, fine, maybe that battle is lost, but there's plenty of others. We still need to be here to put the customer at the forefront, whether it's customer insight or customer experience or customer analytics team, whoever it might be within the broader customer function. We kind of all have to work towards that goal, and you kind of have to just keep going even when something maybe hurts a bit.
Well, no, thank you. I mean, really honest, and I think so many people will relate to that. I think it's really tough, isn't it? Because on any one decision, any one moment in time, you sort of described it as being sort of slightly fluffy. You can kind of recognize that. I think kind of over time, it's anything but fluffy, isn't it? The two are like completely related. And any of those things that we were talking about at the start, where you look at businesses that are truly customer centric, I mean, it just speaks in the numbers to such a volume, whether that's around profit or even I don't know if I show you those figures that we were talking about the other week, where it's less absenteeism in businesses that are sort of truly putting kind of customer right at the heart.
Yeah, and it's not rocket science to say if you treat your customers well and you provide them with good products and a good experience, they'll come back. And I think every business leader knows that the key to maintaining a successful long-term business is repeat customers, and you get repeat customers by providing with good experiences.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andy. Oh, you've got a
It's
battle
okay,
with the
sorry,
sun there.
my lighting is it's gone funny.
Let's not complain. This is the best day I think we've had this year. Hey, thank you so much for chatting to me this morning, Andy. I think so honest, so like refreshing. I think to hear those sorts of challenges and how they're alive. And thanks so much for sharing so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. It's been nice. It's been cathartic, I think, to talk about this type of stuff.
Oh, hey, great. This is good news.